Okay.
Okay, so hi everybody. If you haven't been a part of anything with the birth circle before, then let me introduce myself. My name is Kailyn Browning, and I'm a mom of six, and I have been through quite the journey over the last 10 years as a parent. Um, and I've learned a lot from my pregnancy experiences and my postpartum experiences. And so I first just want to mention that as we're talking about postpartum today, I'm really not just referring to that 6 week period right after baby's born. That's really something that is really defined by you. And I was reading a definition just the other day that described it as the period anywhere from a few weeks after baby's born to 3 years is how this particular resource defined it. Um, and I know for me, it took a good 2 years with my last baby before I finally felt like, okay, I feel like I'm not recovering from that anymore so much. So whatever you define that as is totally fine, and you are welcome. And this stuff should apply. Honestly, who doesn't need help regulating their emotions a little more? So this can apply to anybody to an extent. But let's see. I think where I was at. So yeah, that journey for me really has had a lot of highs and lows, and it's really sparked in me a passion to help other parents to be able to be more prepared and informed and really empowered um, through their pregnancy and their births, and then into the postpartum period. And I mentioned birth and pregnancy because so much of what can happen in our birth situation really can end up having a huge impact on our postpartum. So I've become really passionate about helping parents um, to be educated so they can make decisions through their birth that make them feel empowered and hopefully carry less baggage into the postpartum period, um, and stack the odds in their favor for a more positive postpartum. So I started my own birth services business. It is called Birthsource, and I offer placenta encapsulation, childbirth classes for the reason that I mentioned, and I'm a birth doula. So as I'm working with my clients, we do talk quite a bit too about preparing for postpartum. So today, what we're going to jump into is some of the worksheets and resources that I give my clients that we work through during their pregnancy and in their postpartum time to help them feel more confident and more in control of themselves emotionally and the situations going on around them as much as they're able to. So Bethany has these resources. We've gone through them before, but I think this will still be really, hopefully really good for you too, Bethany. So what we're going to do is delve into some worksheets and handouts that I usually use. And so in the chat, I posted a link in here that you're welcome to look at now. You don't have to, don't feel like you need to right now. It's a link to a Google Drive folder where I've put the handouts and the worksheets so you can have those later and print them out and work through them at your own pace and your own time, maybe with a partner if you want to. But today, what we can do is talk about a lot of the same concepts. We'll go over a lot of the stuff that's in the drive, the folder, and just really bring up more discussion about it all. So we'll start out, I want to go over a little bit with you about some common postpartum mood complications that parents can run into, and briefly talk about some of the things that can contribute to those. But then spend most of our time really just kind of going through some of the exercises that are on the worksheets and just discussing them amongst ourselves. So if you need to take a second to grab yourself a pen and paper, go do that. That way, just as we're talking, if somebody mentions something that you feel like is a good idea that you're going to want to write down when you're working through the worksheets, do that. Or as things come to your mind as we're talking, you can jot those down. And then if you're a really like organized type of personality and like to have everything in neat little boxes, you can transfer that over to those worksheets later and then add your own stuff. So we won't jump into anything super important at this moment, so you can have a minute to go get that stuff. I'm actually going to hide myself so that I think I won't be in the way when I screen share here. I don't know, we'll see. Play with this, I've never done this exactly before, so you get to learn with me. Okay, can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Since I had to move this down so it's out of the way, our little Zoom bar, so I can't see anybody's faces anymore. Just so you know, so if you want to say something, just feel free to shout it out, because I won't be able to see any hands raised or anything like that. Okay, so here we're going to be talking about new parent mood support. Let me jump here real quick. I just want to acknowledge that a lot of the content that is in this is taken, like I said, straight from those worksheets. And those worksheets are actually created by a wonderful birth worker named Olivia Scobie. And she put on a training for birth professionals that I attended a year or so ago on supporting the 1 in 4 being, I believe 1 in 4, 1 in 4, 1 in 5 being the parents who struggle with mood issues after pregnancy. So that is what this content is coming from, and you can check out her site and then her amazing business site, which is postpartumsupporttoronto.com, where she has some more fantastic and free resources for parents in the postpartum period. Even if you're like right in the throes of it and you know you need some serious help, but you're having trouble getting insurance to clear, getting a counselor or something like that, they have therapeutic free e-courses that you can walk yourself through that are kind of for like emergency care for yourself. Now let's jump into this. Try to get that thing to go away. Okay, so this is by Olivia Scobie. This is the Scobie model of postpartum mood. And I just wanted to make sure to share that with you as we got started, just to show you a lot of the different things that can be factors in a person's emotional health during and after pregnancy. Of course, a certain amount of it does come down to genetics, your family history. Those can be good things to consider to kind of gauge whether or not you think there's something, whether or not you think that possibly some mood issues will be something you might encounter in your postpartum period. Obviously, if you've had previous mood concerns, like if you've had anxiety in the past, or OCD or depression, those are things to consider that could put you more at risk for encountering those sorts of things in the perinatal period. Biological things can have to do with it. Of course, our hormones are doing a lot of crazy things immediately after baby's born, and our bodies are trying to readjust, so that can really affect things. As Bethany well knows, sleep deprivation can affect things. Our thought patterns, which is often a lot of just how we have been raised, which can be things just like the way our brains work. Do we have a strategic kind of brain? Are we perfectionists? Do we tend to ruminate about things, like just keep thinking about the same things over and over again and not being able to let it go, or not being able to stay mentally present in what is happening right now in front of us? And then our culture. We are very much held to impossible parenting standards here in the US. And sometimes it's just that expectation to enjoy the work of parenting that can be really hard to grapple with. Because not every aspect of parenting is something that is going to perfectly match your personality or your needs. And there will be seasons that are harder than others. Like maybe you're wired for parenting teens, or maybe babies are what you're all about, and it's like breathing when you're taking care of a baby. Or maybe you love toddlers and that kind of brain development stage. Um, Everybody's different. And one thing that I really took away from the training that Olivia did was she mentioned, nobody judges people when they're like, oh man, teenagers, parenting teenagers is hard. I just can't wait for that stage to be over. But why do we judge people if they happen to feel that way at any point during having a baby? We don't look at it the same way, but we shouldn't judge that any differently. There are some people who are more just prepared or more wired for that, and people who are not. And so I think it can be really helpful just to kind of breathe a sigh of relief and realize that. So anyway, all of those points are all now going to factor into your individual circumstance, which could involve other things like moving. If you or your baby have had health issues around this time, how your birth went, like I mentioned, and how much support you have. Some of us are fantastically blessed and have all kinds of family and friends who are just right there wanting to help and be there and celebrate all this, and really just do whatever you need. And some of us maybe live in an area where we've moved away from our family and we have like nothing unless we're going to pay for that support. And that can be a really hard place to be. But either way, whether you have all those people around you or not, there still can be those emotional issues that you deal with inside, even if people are all around you cheering you on. That can be a challenge. So all of these things factor in together to create your situation when it comes to your postpartum and perinatal mood and thought. So just something to consider, giving a little bit of background. So I want to break down a little bit some of the signs of some of these different mood complications. And so when we're talking about mood and mood complications, it doesn't have to mean like a clinical depression. We could just be talking about temporary parental exhaustion and the way that affects our ability to cope. So here are some of those examples of things that you might notice: mood swings, irritability, sadness, trouble making decisions, changes in appetite, weepiness, just feeling like you can't cope, extreme fatigue, and even the inability to sleep. And I don't want to share all these to be really like, oh, get ready, you're gonna have a horrible life after your baby's born. This is more just to be a validation to you if you've experienced these things, or if you do begin to experience any of these things, that like, hey, yeah, like these can point to something that is off that we can try to identify and now start helping. And if nothing else, just the emotional validation of, okay, this is one of those things that happens. I'm not crazy. I don't need to be hard on myself for having trouble making decisions right now. That can take a huge weight off of you. And all of these things that are in these slides are also in some of the materials that are in that drive. So if you see any of this stuff and you want to remember, I mean, of course, take screenshots if you want, but a lot of it is in the drive too, and you'll be able to see that later. So now we switch to the signs of the baby blues. And you'll see they're actually all the same. Everything in this list is the same. And the key thing to remember is baby blues have a lot to do with, could be that initial exhaustion as you're adjusting to everything, but also your body's hormones adjusting and your body recovering from the hard work of labor and things like that. So we don't get to, I mean, obviously we care and we want to be doing what we can to support a mother in this situation. But it's not something that as professionals we get like worried about if it's happening within like a 2-week stretch and then starts to get better. A lot of moms have that funk at the beginning and then it does improve pretty quickly. when it begins to be an issue is when it's continuing to go on after that period. And that is when we're looking at a postpartum mood disorder. So some signs of a postpartum mood disorder would be all of the things that we just looked at, and then all these are now added to it. And it doesn't mean you're going to have all of these. These are just different things that can be a sign. Hopelessness, apathy, a lack of joy, racing thoughts, or panic attacks. I think a lot of the time when we think of, challenges in the postpartum, we think of postpartum depression. And that's become such a common connection in people's minds that a lot of times people just call postpartum depression postpartum. But there's also postpartum OCD, there's also postpartum anxiety. So things like racing thoughts or panic attacks can point to something that's really off in your body, due to everything that's just happened in this whole perinatal experience. So don't feel like, this is just something else I can't get any help for, or, it doesn't have a name. It does. There's help for it. So along with that, extreme crying, not wanting to be alone with baby, visions or extreme fear of harm coming to baby, or obsessive thoughts or actions. And that can, of course, go along with postpartum OCD. I just want to highlight that, a lot of times the only thing you'll hear is, if you feel like you're having no interest in taking care of your baby, or you might harm yourself for your baby, then let someone know, because that's probably postpartum depression. That is true, but those are some of the extreme signs of it. I don't want you to feel like, if I'm not having those things, I must be fine. I must not be able to get help for the ways I'm feeling. No, those are just two extremes. All of these different things could be things that are pointing you to that. Let me admit, Rebecca. So, okay, we've talked about the negative, which again may or may not even be something you encounter at all. I don't want you to expect that's what postpartum is going to be. We just want you to know these things up front. So if you encounter them, you can recognize them and start seeking out the help you need for it. Because these are the kinds of things that do require for you to start getting professional help to start getting better. And that can mean more than medication. It may mean medication, and there's no shame in that at all. It could also mean natural alternatives if you wanted to explore that. But counseling is huge too. So definitely keep that in the back of your mind.
We often like to suggest when we're working with people that if you don't have a counselor that you like already, to go ahead and look for one while you're pregnant and make an appointment 4 to 6 weeks after your baby is born. Because if you are struggling with any of these extra things after your baby is born, like, you're not going to feel up for that extra task of going to find somebody that you feel comfortable with. Like, that is often the biggest hurdle for people who are seeking counseling or seeking help, is like finding somebody that you feel comfortable with and making that appointment. So if you've already done that before your baby is even born, then it's a lot easier to just go, because you already have the appointment made. And hopefully you're not experiencing any of these really big, hard things. And in that case, you can go and, talk to somebody for an hour about how wonderful your baby is. And you still get to talk to a grown-up for an hour. But if you are in a place that you're really struggling, like, having that appointment and that person who is waiting to hear what you have to say for an hour can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know just in my personal experience, even 4 babies in with my last one, I was struggling with a lot of these things, and knowing what I know from working in the birth world for a long time and having babies before and experiencing similar things before, when I was in the middle of it, I still couldn't recognize it. And so it took a lot for me to start realizing, okay, the things I'm struggling with are major enough that it's valid for me to want to get a counselor. Like, I felt pressure to not spend money on that, or, it's probably not that big a deal, or I could get a book on it or something like that. And like, I just think had I already had a counselor lined up anyway, I wouldn't have had to think through, well, should I not? And she might have been able to point things out to me a lot sooner and help me get help sooner. So, all right, we're going to hop into strategy 1, which is all about prioritizing self-care. And when we're talking about self-care, I feel like it's kind of been branded in a way lately where we think of that as doing elaborate things for ourselves, like going to a spa and having a bubble bath with all the perfect lighting and music and a glass of wine and all these things. And it certainly can be those things. There's definitely a place for those things. But in a lot of ways, it has more to do with our mindset about ourselves and being willing to tune into what is it that I need in this moment? Like, what are my emotions telling me about what need I'm not having met right now, and how can I do something, even if it's just simple, to turn that around? Or, maybe I just need to take 5 minutes to just take some deep breaths for a little bit and then start back into what I'm doing and not just push myself to get through the day. It can be little things like that. But we're going to jump into some things to really think through that are on that worksheet. I promise you, this is the wordiest exercise screen that we have. So this is our first thing to jump into discussing, and things that if you have ideas or hear ideas from others that you will want to put in your own worksheet later, these are the questions that are on that worksheet. So you can think through identifying people in your community that you can turn to for emotional and physical support. This might seem like, okay, why do I need to sit down and write this stuff down? Because I know who's in my life that I can reach out to. But the thing is, when you are in the middle of overwhelm and depression or anxiety or just exhaustion or baby blues, whatever it is, it's weird. You feel like you have no help, or at least from my experience. And I've heard others say this, that it's like you feel like you're in this pit and you can't get out, and you don't know what to do, and a lot of times don't do anything. So having these things written down is huge, because you can put them up on your wall or your fridge now, and they can be right there in your face in the future to remind you, hey, this person, reach out to this person when you feel this or whatever. So there's that. Identifying ways you can talk to yourself or interpret your experiences that feel comforting when you want to change your mood. Identify things that make you feel better when you're overwhelmed or scared, basically when you feel something negative. And identifying things that protect your mood when you do them regularly, because those things are so easy to let slip when we get busy or distracted with something else, like a new baby. So what about you guys? What are things that come to your mind when you see these things to think about?
Well, I think that these are super important, especially because I'm in the thick of things right now. I'm in that postpartum time frame. I know that having your supports identified and then going to those supports, you can't be afraid to then use them once you've identified who they can be. I think it's critical for survival.
Yeah. And I know Rebecca just said in the chat that she's the typical hot bath in the evening kind of girl. Hey, I get it. Nothing wrong with that at all. That time to yourself to relax. For me, I've found that showers are huge. Like, I went through a period in the last year where I took 2 showers a day most of the time, because I took the one in the morning because I had to, because I have oily hair and I have to wash my hair in the morning or I look bad. But then I would take one in the evening when my husband was home and the kids were, still running around, and I would lock the door and get in the shower, and that was just my therapy, because it was time to myself for that long. And Ariel said that her counselor would tell her that sometimes self-care is taking care of a bill or a phone call or some small task around the house that you would feel so much better about when it's done. Yeah, unglamorous, but the feeling of completing something is often so rewarding. Yeah, definitely.
Um, I found that just having like physical closeness with my partner
Mm.
helped a lot, but was like required extra effort in the postpartum period to, and I'm not even talking, just like, sitting like side by side on the couch or something, like touching shoulders.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be like very much, but it really helped. Almost like infants can be like regulated by their parents' bodies or breathing. I found that if I went too long without myself getting, a large body surface of touch that wasn't, this tiny baby I was trying to keep alive and happy, that I was not able to do that as well. So almost like a snuggling or skin to skin or something mattered for me.
That makes sense. Definitely. I'm that way too. Big time.
I think for me, getting out with my baby was a good thing, getting out, getting some fresh air. I remember I had anxiety about breastfeeding in public initially, but I think once I did it a few times, I was less anxious and it became quite normal and natural for me to do that. So yeah, being outdoors is something that I find therapeutic.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say is getting outside at least once a day, which sounds easy, but is sometimes hard. And also taking even just like a 5-minute walk by myself was something I had to like learn how to do and do intentionally.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way about getting out, especially in the past year since I'm like full-time telecommuting. It's like by the time the weekend comes, I mean, pretty much the only place I go during the week is to drop off Kylie at her grandparents and then pick her up at the end of the work day. And so by the time the weekend comes and Saturday morning, I'm like, I gotta get out of the house. And yeah, going on walks, hikes are like my therapy, just getting out and fresh air.
When it comes to mindset or like ways to talk to yourself that feel comforting, one thing can be like mindsets that you want to try on when you're feeling badly or when you notice that you're getting really discouraged or frustrated. And that could be whatever it is that resonates with you. Some examples I have here would be if it helps you to just remind yourself, like, I'm in this for the long game and I don't have to enjoy every moment. It does not make me a bad parent. And I should say this completely still applies to dads and partners. This is not just, the childbearing parent who can encounter these things. Hormonal and biological changes do happen in partners if they are living in the same home and are closely involved in raising that child. These are all definitely things that the other parent can experience as well. Another one, some people, personally, I don't know why, I just don't like this one at all, but for some people I think it's reassuring to hear the days are long but the years are short. Or crying is my baby's way of communicating. Different things like that. or any affirmations, even affirmations that got you through birth. A lot of times they can apply then to the challenges of postpartum. So we can jump to the next one. Those are all good ideas you guys had. So step 2, or strategy 2, we're looking at creating your support team. And again, this is something that seems so obvious. It seems like, well, sure, of course I'm doing that. Well, of course, you know, my mom is going to be around. I don't, you know, it's a given. But really, it's something that can be a whole lot better if we take some time to be really intentional about it ahead of time. So some things to think about are people to ask for help, and start making yourself lists of these things. People to ask for help, things to outsource, and things to just learn to let go of. And so when it comes to getting people to ask for help, one thing you can really think about doing is figuring out ways to train your friends and family in advance and in the middle of things after baby is born. Because oftentimes they want to help, but they aren't really 100% sure. And, you know, usually people do say things like, let me know if I can help. And then we say, okay. And then we're kind of like, feel like, well, I don't need to ask them right now. I've got this. But then we're actually kind of crumbling. So one thing you can do is like set yourself up a meal train. That's what I'm going to do this time. Finally learned on my 5th baby now to like arrange in advance for all these people, to anybody who says, hey, let me know what I can do, or people that you know you could reach out to ask them, hey, would you want to be a part of a meal train that I'm going to set up? You don't have to wait for other people to do it for you. Think of people who could maybe come and do the dishes, or, you know, just the really concrete things that take loads off of you and allow you to focus more on the baby. We're not really talking so much in most cases about people coming in and taking care of the baby for you, because that can really interfere with your bonding, and if you're trying to breastfeed, it can interfere with getting a good supply and things like that. But really helping people take other things off of your shoulders so you can focus on you and baby. And there's nothing wrong with having someone take the baby so you can get a nap or a shower or something like that. You guys have any other ideas or thoughts to add to it?
Getting a housekeeper if you can afford it. That's been a saver of my mental health recently, finding a way to work that into the budget, just because my environment really sets me off emotionally. If I feel like my environment's crazy, you know, or unclean, and there's never enough time to keep on top of everything. So having extra help as far as that goes makes me, like, you know, not get triggered by everywhere I look in the house.
Mm. Yeah, I need that all the time. Not just when I'm postpartum.
I'm going to be moving to Athens permanently very soon, and I'm considering looking for a babysitter to help with my toddler, because I'm expecting to have a C-section. So not only will I be moving to a new area, I'm going to be recovering from a C-section and have a toddler and a newborn and no family. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be needing some help, I think, at least for the first 4 to 6 weeks.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd say, you know, as much as is affordable for you, hiring professionals for different things is amazing. Even if it's like a dog walker or somebody else to do the mowing. You You know, it's so great now how much grocery delivery type of stuff there is these days, or at least grocery pickup options. You know, as you're building your registry for things, you could even consider adding to that, asking for gift cards to restaurants and things like that, that you can then DoorDash or whatever during postpartum. I know I'm going to be trying to focus this time on really filling my freezer with a lot of pre-made things too. I can just throw in a crock pot. It can also be important maybe to sit down and, if you have a partner, negotiate with them in advance and try to get a good understanding of the balance of responsibilities that are going to be happening during that period of time, and figure out what each other's expectations are on that, so that that's not an added stressor in the middle of things.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Just figure out, you know, are there things that with your current division of responsibilities that need to be adjusted, or what things are you both willing to just let slide for a while? It's really okay. I don't think anyone's expecting to walk into your house and see it all wonderful and perfect in that period of life. And hiring a postpartum doula can be huge too. I know we're broadcasting this everywhere since it's online, so it could be great to look up who's in your area. Postpartum doula is great because, you know, they're coming and helping with whatever practical things you need, but then they're also more trained and experienced in like the hands-on and emotional support and informational support that really meet you where you are in the postpartum, and they can try to help get you really evidence-based tips and ideas on how to handle different things, rather than just what different like family members and friends tell you you should do. Okay, we can jump to the next one, which is strategy 3, finding the right people. And I like this quote. It's all about finding people who are your kind of crazy. And this is less about people who are going to be right beside you helping you, or, you know, a phone call away, and more about figuring out what community you relate to, because you're going to need that. It's really easy to isolate yourself and become so busy and consumed in this new parenting role, and even if it's just a new role in the sense that you're now going from 2 to 3 kids or whatever, and kind of just not be connected to people anymore. And especially if you're like the first in your friend group to have a baby or something like that, you can feel really misplaced after a baby's born. So it's important to seek out groups that are going to be truly supportive to you. And those can definitely be groups online. I mean, those are, especially now with COVID, those are something people, you know, seek out a lot. But of course, I'm sure you all know about all the drama that can come in those. So finding ones that are actually uplifting.
I can share that we at the Birth Circle are helping to host a pregnancy and postpartum during the pandemic support group, which is also on Zoom, and it actually meets next Monday. If anybody is interested in that, whether you're still pregnant and just getting ready, or we have some postpartum, and that has been a really supportive group. so far. And since it is on Zoom, we have some people from all over the country who have been coming pretty regularly. We've been meeting every month. And so that has been a really nice drama-free group to check in with if anybody's interested in joining that. I will put the website where you can sign up. One of our local midwives, her name is Ash, is leading it and facilitating it. And so they have a sign up on their website. And then they'll send you reminder emails, hey, this is coming, this is coming up tomorrow, and that kind of thing. And the link for the Zoom.
Ariel, is there a Facebook group or community that's specifically associated with Ash's meetings, or are we just pointing people towards our postpartum Facebook group we already had?
We have not been doing Facebook in between. We haven't really done much on our postpartum group because that was kind of like, we had agreed with the people, I guess we could change it now, like we had agreed with the people at the beginning of last year who were in it, like this is going to be for people who have like come to the meeting and we've met in person. So of course now like we're not doing that. So far we've just been meeting on Zoom monthly.
Okay.
But we could talk about looking into that.
Okay. So yeah, stay tuned on that, people. Olivia Scobie, that I mentioned, who created a lot of this content, she has a Facebook group that is called Shame Free Parenting. And it is a global group and all are welcome there. So that's one you can check out. If you are more on the natural side of things or wanting to explore more natural kind of parenting avenues, there are some groups I know of that, there's all kinds of them you can find on Facebook as far as that goes. Just type in natural parenting or something and you'll find groups. But I know specifically there's a couple different ones that are called Crunchy Moms that can be helpful, and like you can go there with any question about anything and you'll get all kinds of great answers. If you're more in the Parkersburg area, which obviously if you're in Parkersburg, you're still not too far away from Athens to be plugged into things with the birth circle. And since we're virtual now, anybody is plugged in to us now or can be. But there's also a group in Parkersburg that's called Mamaology, one word. And they have a Mamaology page on Facebook. And then you can, from there, find the Mamaology private discussion page, is what it's called. And it's just another little group where moms can share and ask questions, and I don't notice much drama in it. But the key is finding groups that you relate to. As you go, you're going to figure out more about what your parenting style tends to be. And, it can be hard if that's very different from the style of your family members or people that you've known in your social circles leading up to now. And that might be something you'll have to seek out. And those people don't have to be people that you agree with every single thing about. You don't have to have, let's say maybe you have a religious affiliation, so you go to the religious meetings for that, whereas then there's a non-religious group over here that's all about natural parenting. You can still be plugged in there and have people you relate to in that and get a lot from that without relating the same on everything. And then just people within your current circles. You may find now that all of a sudden somebody in your church that you've known forever is someone that you really want to start connecting with because they had a baby before you and they can help answer your questions or whatever. You can relate to them in a different way now. Anybody else have any ideas to throw out? Okay, we can go on to our fourth strategy, which is
Actually,
go-
Kailyn,
yeah, go ahead.
there's one thing I might add to that that I hadn't thought or heard much, but I've actually gotten a lot of support from past, like even work mentors or family friends, like my mom's friends, like people in a different generation that maybe don't have grandchildren themselves, but have a lot of energy and love and wisdom
Mhm.
to share. Maybe they were parents at some point, maybe they weren't, but that's been a sort of surprising it, not even like within your own generation, but like finding older people in a different stage of life that I've gotten a lot of support from.
That's awesome. Okay, well, we can jump into strategy 4, which is managing stress. And I love this quote too, that it's not stress that kills us, it is our reaction to it. We all are going to have stress in our lives. You hear so much about, well, reduce the stress in your life. And then that itself can cause stress because you're like, I don't know what to do to get rid of the stress. I can't help it. So being able to face stressful situations and environments in ways where we're able to kind of not let it get to us as badly, or find ways to counsel ourselves through it a little bit so we can cope better. So here are some ideas. You can rate your mood. So it just in the middle of any point in a day, just stop and rate your mood for a minute. It can be really great if you can figure out some way to get in a habit of that, like a routine part of the day, to do that at least once a day. And then as the more you get into that habit, the more you might just think of it off and on other times in the day. And there's no right number. The point of it is just to start training your brain to be able to take a step back and assess what's going on in me right now. And then it's suddenly not controlling you as much. It's just one more factor going on in your life, and you can recognize it and then give it its place and do what you need to do about it, if anything. So let's practice and think about that right now. You don't have to say it out loud, but just like right now, think to yourself what your mood would be. So if you can start tracking this for a while, and especially when you're postpartum, just take a minute every day when you're getting your breakfast or something to think about it, and maybe stick it in the notes on your phone. Something that's really just right there, not a huge new routine to add to your life. Then if you notice that it's considerably low for several days in a row, that could be a red flag to you that, hey, maybe I need to be talking to somebody about this. Whether it's a doctor or just a trusted friend at first, just to start putting that out there and recognizing that there's something off in your life right now. Okay, let me tell you about this really cool app. So there's a free app that I just kind of discovered by accident. So write this one down. It's called in love while parenting. And it is really neat because it teaches you different little things to help you with your relationship with your partner if you have one, and also with your baby or children. And you can, like, the basis of it is that there's these tiny little like 2-minute video things that you watch. And then it doesn't take long before you're through the whole thing, and it's a lot of great content to learn. But the coolest thing I've found about it is when I downloaded it, it asked me if I wanted notifications or something like that at the beginning, and I said yes. And so every day, at least once a day, and I think it's just at random times, it will send me a push notification that will say, what are 3 things that you're feeling right now? And it'll like list a few examples real quick. It just shows up at the front of my phone, and that makes me think about it for a second, just enough to think, okay, what are some things I'm feeling, and start getting in that habit. So even if you just download the app just to get that notification and don't do anything else with it, it's really cool for that. You could also give your mood a color. So identifying a color that describes your mood, and then elaborating on why you chose that color, elaborating to yourself on why. So like if your feeling is red, okay, is it red because you're angry, or is it red because you're excited? Do you feel gray because you're feeling down, or is it because you're just kind of neutral right now? Doesn't mean anything's wrong. That can be another fun way to do it. And then making a gratitude and a junk list. When you're looking at the worksheets, you'll find that they use a different word. So I made it junk. And you can just quickly rattle that off to yourself. You hear a lot about thinking about what you're thankful for, and that is huge. Obviously, that's a very good idea. It really trains our brains to have more joy in our lives, and then notice more things throughout the day that we appreciate and that are good. But I think there can be a lot of pressure to only think about those things. Like, well, I'm supposed to be grateful. I'm supposed to be thinking about all the things that I'm thankful for right now. I'm supposed to be so thankful to have this baby. I'm supposed to be so happy that I'm pregnant because I tried so long to get pregnant. And now I feel guilty because, you know, these things bring me down, certain details about it. So I think a really great way to do it is write down both. Write down a few things that are really on the top of your, at the top of your mind right now, that are negative things that are bothering you, because those deserve attention and validation. And it's okay. Feeling those things is not wrong. And then recognize that, be willing to basically like hold that in one hand, metaphorically, and in the other hand, hold the things that bring you joy, or the things that you can pick out that make you grateful today. So you can still say, okay, these things are crappy in my life right now, but, and you know, and that matters, but I'm also going to pay attention to the fact that these things are good. And you can make up your own ideas of other, any way that resonates with you to start bringing your mood to the front of mind. You guys have anything that you do or have done or have heard of that are good ways to do that?
One of the ways that we've talked about in one of the postpartum groups, Ash led us in a kind of exercise, and it probably has a name, and I'm totally blanking on it. But they suggested that, like, one of the things that often happens is, like, when you're in especially a negative mood, you kind of tend to like have inertia there, and like it's hard to get out of the negative mood or a difficult mood, and to get yourself back to even, or like kind of back to balance from that. And so they kind of led us in like a back and forth, like practicing by just like at a time when you're really quiet and you're not really in a stressful situation, practicing imagining a moderately stressful situation, not like the worst trauma you've ever had, but like a moderately stressful or uncomfortable situation for a few minutes and kind of like noticing how your body feels, and like how you're reacting to that, like if you're holding some tension somewhere in response to that. And then like intentionally switching to thinking about something that you really enjoy, or that you're grateful for, or a happy memory or something like that. And like feeling how that changes, how your body is responding and how that changes, and kind of training your brain that like we're feeling and we're noticing these negative emotions, but we don't have to live here. And it's okay to both acknowledge these, kind of similar to like the gratitude and the junk list. Like it's okay to acknowledge these things, and the way that our bodies feel about them. And we can also come out of that and come into something else and not get stuck here. So I felt like that was kind of a helpful way to think about it, and like a practice that you could do, when you're not in that the depths of the stressful situation,
Mhm.
to just kind of like practice going back and forth from a negative emotion or your junk list to your gratitude list, and like helping your, because like a lot of emotions and things are also like really based in your body and how you hold tension, and in your like your body releases different hormones based on the things that you're feeling. And there's like a lot going on that like practicing not getting stuck in one thing um, is apparently helpful to you. And then when you are in like a really tough place postpartum, like your body has more resilience to that because you've practiced it, if that makes sense. Some of you may have been there and may have a better way to explain it than I currently am, but I thought that it was an interesting perspective.
That's really cool. Yeah, because it could help you get more oriented to your body, and just next time you may not even realize that you're super stressed out, but if you might, from practicing, you might be able to just kind of suddenly notice, oh, I'm like really clenching my jaw right now. So what's going on? And then kind of step back enough to be like, okay, so this thing is apparently bothering me. What can I shift my thinking to for a minute? We're so good at, we're used to thinking in the negative. I think it's like our default. So the more we practice recognizing it and shifting it and thinking about positive things, the more we start literally restructuring our brain to have a happier set point, if you will.
And I think that like the important part about a couple of things that you mentioned there, like that it's not just ignoring the negative feelings or trying
Yeah.
to push them away, but like and a really important part of it is acknowledging the feelings that you're having and why you may be having them, and accepting them as part of your life.
Yeah.
And that isn't like, I guess like we use the word like negative feelings, but
Mm.
I don't know if there's a better word for it.
That's true.
But like that it's a normal part of your life, and especially a part of your life that's like a really big transition around pregnancy and birth, and you're raising an infant. Like it's a really, really normal part to have really tough feelings, and to I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, and I really struggled with, was like having two different feelings at the same time, like
Mm.
both feeling really like I'm so in love with my baby, and I'm really happy that they're here, um, and this is like a miracle, but also, man, I'm tired, and I haven't talked to a grown-up in 3 days, and I really have to pee, and this also feels like it kind of sucks. Like there's a lot of times I feel like around postpartum where you're like feeling both things, and then maybe you're feeling guilty about, you know, feeling both of those things are like, you should only be happy.
Mhm.
But then you're like adding guilt as a third feeling. And all of that is like really normal. But I think a lot of this kind of like separating, and it's like separating yourself a little bit so that you can kind of feel like, yeah, this is what I'm feeling and that's okay. And if this is a feeling that I don't want to sit in, or I want to acknowledge and I want to move past it. I don't want to just ignore it because it's part of my experience right now, but I don't want to just live here all the time, and let this one feeling own me. I want to be able to move on and be resilient to a lot of different things that are coming.
I love that. That's a great way to explain it. So, by the way, if you've been seeing around online or in magazines or whatever this term called mindfulness, that sounds like some really existential thing you do up on a mountaintop or something. All of this that we're talking about is mindfulness. So it's pretty simple to start incorporating into your life, but the fancy term for these concepts we're talking about stepping back a little bit to recognize what's going on in your body or your mood, and making decisions from there. It's all called mindfulness. You can do it. Okay, so strategy 5, get baby ready. If you're pregnant, if you're already past that point, that is okay. You are still in the right place. But if you are pregnant or trying to conceive or anything like that, then when you're in that pregnancy period, obviously we're working on getting baby ready. That might seem like something we don't even need to mention. But a specific way you can do this, if you're this type of person, okay, let me give you that caveat, is to make a list of lists. And I don't say this to like add a bunch of overwhelming stress to you to think, oh, I have to come up with all this stuff and now I have to think about all these things. It's just that, okay, these things that are in the example here, like things to buy, things to prepare and organize, like if you're making freezer meals or wanting to get together a meal train, there's people you're wanting to see. I know a lot of times people are like, well, I want to go take this little trip for the weekend to go see these friends before the baby's born, or just go to dinner with this person before the baby's born. If you have appointments you need to make for yourself, like getting yourself a counselor for sometime about 6 weeks after your due date, birth prep, like taking birth classes, all those things I know for me at least tend to just start swirling around in my head, especially when you start hitting a place where you really feel like you're nesting. It's just like this consuming thing, and it can get really overwhelming. So that's where this idea of making a list can come in and be helpful, because if you can just put pen to paper and make yourself these separate lists if you need to, separate sheet for each one, things to buy, here's all the things. And if if it starts to, if you think of more things later while you're in the middle of making dinner and it's starting to overwhelm you, then try to like kind of make a mental note and go add those to your paper later. And then it's not something that you feel like you have to try to remember all the time and have this urgency to go do all of it right now before you forget, and can kind of help you feel like you have it under control in one place. You can see what you have left to do. You can prioritize when and how you want to do it, and try to have as many of these things done as you can before baby is born. And I'll also issue the warning not to feel like every single thing has to happen before baby's born. Sometimes they come earlier, and you know what? It's okay. It's okay. And baby's still here. If your nursery wasn't done, the baby doesn't care. Like, as long as you've got a safe place for it to sleep, you're good. Baby doesn't care if everything is on pretty hangers with the little size dividers and all of that. So what do you guys think? What are things off the top of your head, those of you especially who are pregnant right now, or those of you who are not pregnant anymore who might have ideas of things that are good to put on these lists.
I don't know. I keep lists all the time. Just that's what I do anyways, naturally. So pregnant or not.
That's what makes you such a great birth circle secretary.
Making list of things really frees my mind, because ever since being pregnant and now that I'm in postpartum, I can't remember diddly nothing. And so the list, they really save my life. I still make list of, my groceries or things that I need to do, or a list of the next time somebody stops in to see me, like if my mom visits or my dad visits, a list of things that I need them to do. So that has really been the key for me.
That's a great idea. Marlene, a local midwife here, recently in the Facebook group, she had posted the idea to have a list made up before baby's born if you can, or if you're already in the middle of it, make the list now, it's fine, of things people can do when they want to stop by to visit the baby. And direct them to that, because a lot of times people are like, was there anything I can do for you before I go? And you're like, oh, I think we're pretty good, like on the spot in the moment. But if you have a handy list right there on the fridge, you can be like, well, on the fridge I wrote these things down. If there's any of those you feel like you'd like to help with, that would be appreciated, but you don't have to. Or I've heard some people say, make it clear that if visitors come, they're going to be asked to do something on the list. So it depends on how you want to go about that.
Yeah, I use the notes on my phone, and that's where I keep all my lists. And so it's kind of like, I pretty much always have my phone, so it's always with me. And when something pops into my head, I can add it onto the list or add it onto my calendar, that kind of thing.
I feel like I need to follow you around for a day and watch how you make these things work, because you're so organized, and I want to be more like you.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So that's a pretty concrete concept there for that strategy. So now we're on strategy 6, and this is the last one, which is to set realistic expectations. And I know, especially if you've never had a baby before, or anytime you're adding a baby, you're adding another child to this situation, it's a little hard to know what's realistic and what's not. So part of it is just being willing to be flexible later and realize, oh, this thing that I really was committed to making happen, maybe it's just not going to look that way for me, and that's okay. And kind of accepting, again, what your situation is, and the fact that you are still being an amazing parent because you're in this moment now pivoting to make a decision that is still for the best for you and your family and your children, even if it's not the one you thought it was going to be. But I used an image here of a beautiful crib in a lovely nursery just as one example of a kind of expectation sometimes that I hear different parents talk about. They make this beautiful nursery and then figure out that their baby's actually never going to sleep in that crib because their baby only wants to be with them all the time. So then they have a baby in their room instead. And that's okay. Obviously, we want to be following safe standards for sleep, whether that's in your bed or not. But that's just one example. So talk to me about this, guys. Those of you who have had babies before, what are some expectations you had that you realized were not realistic?
Yeah, I moved into rented accommodation, and I had this vision of my first child having this perfect nursery. that definitely wasn't the case. It was like a mismatch of different furniture, and realizing I didn't have a changing table and making do with this piece of furniture that was already there. And and now I finally got a house to make my own, and with this second baby perhaps I can be a bit closer to what I hoped for. But I realized, you know, through that first experience that it really doesn't matter, and as you say, the baby doesn't know any different.
Right. The nurseries are more for us, you know, just so we can take pictures of it and ooh and ah over it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we found out that we were having another girl, and I'm excited because now I don't have to like redo the nursery. We moved Kylie into another room, and now that'll just be her room, and I don't have to buy new clothes and new sheets and everything. We just reuse it.
Yeah, and since
She doesn't have a different bedspread than, you know, Kylie did, so one less thing.
yeah, and since Kylie's not too much older, like all her stuff is still on trend, I'm sure, you know, like not crazy outdated looking or anything.
Yeah, I still like it, so.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, one thing that I am doing though is I feel like pressured to like do everything that I did with the first pregnancy. So like, you know, taking the belly pictures and making sure that I'm gonna do like the baby book that I put together, which I kind of like pretty much just finalized recently, getting all the pictures like into it and stuff. And so I do feel pressured to, you know, do all those things and activities that I did for the first pregnancy and the first, you know, after birth period. And because I don't want the second baby to feel left out or whatever, or different. But it's also like, I know a lot of people let that kind of thing go because it's like, yeah, whatever. Don't have to do that now when you're chasing a toddler and everything around.
This is like more of a physical expectation. Well, maybe two. One was that I feel like it's overly emphasized, like, when are you going to get your body back after you're pregnant? And I feel like I want to normalize, like, you don't have to ever. Like, that's something that is important for some people, and I certainly think that, you know, exercising and physical health is important, but that the size and the shape, I think what I hear a lot of people say is that, like, my body's just a different shape. Like, I might be the same weight that I was earlier, but my body is a different shape, because your body has been through a ton, by being pregnant and stretching and expanding and contracting in all these different ways, that I feel like we need to normalize more of, like, your body is amazing, and it's probably not going to look the way that it did before you were pregnant because it was such a monumental experience in your body, and that's okay, and that your worth is not based on achieving some kind of standard, or you know, returning your body to look like it had never had a baby, because your body has had a baby, um, and that's important too. And the other thing, and along with that too, like, I felt like I just it didn't occur to me maybe how long it would take to just even feel like kind of normal. It's a different normal, but just kind of like my old strength. Like, there's just, like, when you're pregnant, you have these hormones that are relaxing your muscles and the joints in your pelvis, because that's how the baby comes out. So that's an important thing to happen. But like, I felt like it took longer than I was expecting for those joints to really like come back together again, and to feel like I wasn't just like loose all the time, in that weird way that we feel during pregnancy. Like, I feel like it took like a year, to really like feel like my body was even just like put back together from those hormones. also, the thing that nobody told me, and I know that we have a lot of second pregnancies in this group, is that the after pains when your uterus is contracting again after the baby is born are worse with the second baby. My partner was like looking up like what terrible complication is she having, like why is she in so much pain, this is not like the first time, something is wrong. And then like every mother of more than one kid that I mentioned it to, they're like, oh yeah, it was totally worse for the second baby. Yeah, isn't that just the worst? And I was like, you guys all knew about this and nobody told me. So I'm telling you, and you can hold that expectation. I don't know how it goes for after the second one, but you can hold on to that expectation that maybe you're not dying if you still feel like you're in labor the next day. If you do feel like something's like really wrong with you, you should follow your gut and get help. But also, there are some expectations that the contracting is harder the second time because your uterus is stretchier.
And they do say like each new baby, it's like exponentially worse beyond the second one too. So heating pads can become your best friend. Let me just say that.
I'm going to have to get off of here because the baby's getting ready to sleep. I can just tell that she's about at that point, and that means I need to go sleep too. And so I'm
Go
going
for
off
it.
here. But it has been so nice to see all of you. And Kailyn, I've really enjoyed your talk this evening. And Kailyn was my doula, and I really just appreciate her as a person and as a friend and think very highly of her. So thank you all, and I hope you have a good night.
Thanks. It was good to
So
see you,
much.
Bethany. Come tell us
Bye.
your birth story next month.
Oh, I'd
Yes.
love to.
Yes. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
And my C-section is due the same day as your birth stories event.
Ah.
I could perhaps contact you then.
Well, you could join Zoom from the hospital if you really want to. But no,
Live birth story.
Yeah.
we do traditionally ask like at the beginning of every meeting, which we didn't do today, which we could have done for Bethany, but we can catch her next month. But like we usually do ask at the beginning of every meeting if anybody has a birth story they want to share. So you're welcome to share in June.
And are we going to do postpartum in June again?
That's a good
Postpartum
question.
stories?
We certainly can. I don't have a plan for June yet. We don't have anything scheduled. I wasn't sure if people would want to revisit it again since we're doing postpartum this month, but also I
true,
think
yeah.
that postpartum is something that we should talk more about. And I am totally open to doing postpartum stories as well if people want to do that.
Mhm. That'd be great. So that was our last exercise. Now, when you're looking at that folder on the Google Drive, which I really recommend that you do take some time to pour over that later, you'll see a lot of really specific questions that really kind of take time to internalize on your own about those expectations. It'll ask you to spend some time thinking about your vision for yourself as a parent, things like, what does it mean for me to become a parent or add a sibling? What do I think life with a baby will be like? And then where did these ideas come from? And how would I feel if I were not able to fulfill this? And how can I become more flexible in these expectations and be able and willing to embrace whatever comes? And there's also a sheet you'll find in there that kind of goes along with the same concept. It's called the 6 Markers of Impossible Parenting. And it highlights 6 things that our culture tends to teach us or pressure us to believe or do as a parent that really are kind of impossible. So you can kind of see that now and think through any ways that maybe you have already adapted this mentality so you can break away from it a little bit. and it won't like feed your guilt later. Oh, also super important, in that folder there is a how am I doing, it's called how am I really doing handout. There's one page that is a lot of questions to assess yourself, and also very important for your partner to assess themselves with it, that kind of can point to if you have some signs of depression or anxiety. There's a list for depression and a list for anxiety. So keep those handy. I would definitely look at them now while pregnant too. Prenatal anxiety and depression and OCD and all those things are a thing. So that way you're aware and, you know, on top of it now. But then keep that handy in postpartum as well. Just let that be a sign that maybe you should start talking to somebody about it and see if it's something that you should get some more support for. So those are the exercises, and I just wanted to end with just a few quick final keys that can really make a huge difference in your postpartum. One tip is to encapsulate your placenta. Arrange to have that done by somebody in your area. If you're in the Mid-Ohio Valley area, you can contact me because I do that. But having it encapsulated, it's one of those things where there's not a ton of evidence on like hard and fast evidence that, oh yes, it does give you all of these benefits. There's also no research to show that there's any harm in it. And it's something that so many parents rave about, that it they say that it really seemed to have helped them, that it's worth investing in that insurance, if you will, and having that available. Because, you know, once that placenta is disposed of after your baby's born, there's no getting it back. So arranging in advance to have your placenta prepared, so that you can then consume it in the postpartum period is really good insurance, just to help you know that you have that if you need it. Some people have it done and then find that they really just don't ever feel like it's doing a whole lot for them, or like they feel a need for it, they feel okay. A lot of people say that like it was a huge difference when they would miss a pill, they could really tell, and they loved it. And I have a friend who said she got to the point where her body was craving it. And then there's people who, I have heard some stories of people who felt like it exacerbated anxiety or things like that. So it really has a lot to do with what your body is going through at the time and what it needs. But when we look at nature around us, a lot of mammals do consume their own placenta after birth. And so it's kind of a interesting hint that maybe it's something that would be beneficial for us as well.
I had both of mine done. My midwife did them.
Mhm.
And I do feel like the capsules helped me postpartum. And I do occasionally, like, I have a few left in the freezer, and like occasionally I'll think of it and I'll take one. And I also, she walked me through how to make them into a tincture.
Yeah.
So I've done that, and like it really helps on the first day of my period. Like it helps even me out and like diffuse some of the cramping. And I am not to this point yet, but I hear that like tinctures last pretty much indefinitely because it's just straight up alcohol. And that it can help even out the hormones during menopause. And that it can, like, it, because my body and my daughter's body made the placenta together, like it could help her when she starts to menstruate, if she would take the tinctures, because it's part of her too. So I'm not to that point yet, or the menopause part, but I did find some help. I did find it was helpful, both postpartum and currently now, 3 years out, helping with cramps during my period.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, I was going to mention that too. Tinctures are something else that I do offer and can make from your placenta. And you can do both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And I actually have recently learned how to make salves from it as well, because it has skin benefits. There are some different like higher end cosmetic companies who use sheep placenta in their skincare lines.
But that's not on the label.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they put that on the label, but that's what's in it because it has so many different like properties that are beneficial for the skin. So that's just kind of one more thing you can glean from your placenta if you want to. And I promise it's not gross. Like it's just at that point it's a powder that gets gets added into a salve recipe, and it smells like chocolate because I use cocoa butter and shea butter as part of the base. So it's just chocolatey. But people use it for like diaper rashes, eczema. Some people just like to use it as a daily moisturizer, just all kinds of, skin ailment things. It's just kind of a general aid for that. So there's that real quick. Another thing, I know I mentioned at the beginning of this talk about how important it is to be really well equipped and really prepared and empowered feeling during your birth. And that really comes down in many, many, many ways to how much you have prepared in advance. And that has to do with how much like you know about your options and the benefits and risks of them, so you can decide what you want. And also kind of going back to the mindfulness things we talked about, it also can have a lot to do with where you're at emotionally and mentally regarding birth. And so during these gentle birth workshops that I and a colleague teach, we spend half of the time focusing on brain preparation and restructuring your brain for better odds for a positive birth and therefore a positive postpartum. And then we also focus in a lot on your different birth options, the evidence behind them, and then how to negotiate within whatever birth setting you're going to be birthing in to make those things happen. So we have one coming up online very soon, starting on May 10th. It is a Facebook group based class, and it's structured in such a way that it can work around your schedule very well. It's not like you're sitting there in front of the computer for a certain amount of time every day for those whole 6 days. You can get a hold of me if you want more info about that. And hiring a birth doula goes along with what we were just talking about. Your birth doula is someone who will walk with you prenatally, help answer your questions, help you draft up your own birth preferences list, and then help you navigate during your birth within whatever setting you're birthing at to try to help those things that are important to you happen, and to just be an emotional and practical support for you throughout your labor to help it progress. Having a doula present has been shown to greatly reduce cesarean rates, reduce the need for epidurals, so many different things. And there could be whole other talks on all of these topics. But that is it. If you have questions about any of the rest of this or are interested in the gentle birth workshops or having your placenta prepared in a certain way, or if you are looking for a birth doula, I am of course in the Mid-Ohio Valley area. We have a list on our Birth Circle website. The birth workers resource list lists some other doulas in the area as well. And I'm not sure what each of them are doing, but I am also willing to do virtual doulaing if you are going to be birthing in a space that will accommodate that. Just because right now with COVID, that's becoming something hospitals are really accommodating a lot when hospital may not allow a doula in. Having them virtually is at least the next best thing. So that's something that's available as well. So feel free to contact me in any of these ways. Or I don't know if I mentioned, I am the assistant director for the Birth Circle, so you can always just reach out to any of us at the Birth Circle, and whoever it is will pass along to me that you're wanting to get a hold of me. But that is everything. Thank you guys so much for your participation and sharing these things from your own experiences and your own wisdom. I feel like that's the best way for us all to learn, is just to learn from each other. I know we're getting short on time, but does anybody have any questions or things they wanted to add before we wrap up?
Do you think my doctor in Charleston, West Virginia, would be able to point me in the right direction for placenta I don't think I can say the word. I'm looking online, but I'm struggling to find someone who could help me.
Yeah, they might. I mean, it'd be worth asking.
Yeah.
If nothing else, I can, we could figure out, maybe like between me and some other birth workers in the area, we could probably figure out who might be somebody close to that area.
Yeah, because presumably you need to be there taking the placenta as soon as possible. It's no good me bringing it back to Athens, is it?
Well, it can be stored in a refrigerator for up to 48 hours. And then if for whatever reason it was going to take longer than that before you could get it to somebody, you can put it in the freezer. So it's not like life or death, make or break, if you can't get it to someone very quickly. Usually when I have clients, I try to pick it up same day or the next day. It's not like crazy urgent that it be immediate, as long as it's being stored quickly in a refrigerator. So I'm like, I have someone right now in Zanesville who we're arranging with, and that's about 2 hours from me. So honestly, Charleston is close.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I'm willing to do that area. I don't know, we could try to find out if there's anyone closer. Just if it ends up being like more than an hour-ish, I usually try to arrange with maybe a family member or someone to bring it from where you are to like some kind of midpoint.
Yeah, my husband could do that. He's going to need to pick up my son in Ripley and then go back to in the evening, I would think, because we don't want to abandon our son for a few days with me recovering in the hospital. So yeah, so that could be possible if putting it in a what do you call it, a cool box or something with ice packs, that works.
Yeah,
I don't know if you'd agree to it. I have to see.
Oh yeah, that's what we do. And that's
and someone here is saying that it was a different hospital, but they were able to store it in the fridge at the hospital. But that is like, your doctor might not know somebody who provides that service, but it is something that you want to have in your birth plan and talk with your hospital about beforehand, that you want them to save it. Because otherwise they will just follow their normal protocol for disposing of it. So you do want to make sure, especially like if you're having a planned C-section, like make that part of the plan.
Yeah, only with you mentioning it now, as it occurred to me that might help in my recovery of the C-section, which is even more important when you've got a toddler to look after as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I would add to what Ariel said too, and say like, whoever you have that's your birth support with you there, I would even though you might have it in paper and you might mention it to them when you first get to the hospital that you're going to want to keep your placenta, I would really try to have your support person like remind them, even like as it's coming out, like remind them again, just because it's so not their standard that a lot of times it's just automatic, they forget and they just dispose of it.
Right. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, but we can talk further if you want to, because there's some other tips that I usually give parents before they, before that they're actually in the middle of that, to try to help make it successful for them.
Okay, cool.
Anybody else have any questions or thoughts?
Well, thank you so much, Kailyn. Those were all really great resources and tools, and I'm glad that you put the Google folder together again. I think that's a good idea, that we can continue to do for these meetings, with extra resources. So thank you.